Sunshine. Mr. Sunshine. What would you like? I have one. Somebody wanted to give something here. Okay, everybody. That was kind of fun. Do that once in a while. Yes, sir.
It's an announcement. If you wonder why Jamie Rankin is not here, her brother had some kind of accident, and she's at the ER with him right now.
Oh, well, we didn't know that.
Which brother, man? Adam. Yeah. I don't know how bad it is or whatever, but that's where she is.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
I'll put in $1 in for your little social idea. I like that was good.
Thank you. You're very kind.
Don't encourage him.
Yeah.
John. Next $1's gonna be for your short prayers.
Yeah. I want to do a fucking brag on some of our members here. And in fact, I'm going to do a $5 fucking brag. All right. This is it. Now, who are these members I'm going to brag about? I'd like to listen. Wyman Hagler, Wayne Promislow, Owen Hand, ×2, Marty Forsythe, Jay Patel, Greg Dyson, Bob Allen, Dean Boss. Why am I bragging about them? It's because they have remembered sometime during the past 6 months to make an annual contribution to our club's endowment foundation. Remember, those contributions go to the principal. It lays in that fund in perpetuity and earns interest and dividends. So our club can grant scholarship to young individuals who otherwise couldn't afford it, get to go to places like the technical college, earn a skill, get an education, get a good job, get a family, and be contributing Americans. What better cause? So, for the rest of you that haven't made an annual contribution, you can bring a check to me at any time, just make it out to Beaufort Endowment Foundation. Or, I've got some contribution envelopes over on this name tag table. You can get one on your way out. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, John. Mr. President, are you still there? I can't see you. Yeah, I'm a small guy, so I'm do the best I can. Are you finished?
Did I have somebody to handle?
Owen.
I just want to brag on my wife. This Saturday, she will put up with me for 51 years of wedding bliss.
She's on her way to sainthood. Thank you, Mr. Sunshine, and thank you, everyone. It's with great interest that I introduce the person who's going to introduce our guest speakers. I'm a Civil War, military kind of guy, and I've been to a lot of the battlefields. And I was talking to Larry about our speakers today. I look forward to this. I think it's going to be very illuminating for all of us. And so, without further ado, here's Larry Rowland.
Thanks, Jack. It's my pleasure to introduce two close friends, both historians, for today's program. The first is Dr. Stephen R. Wise, who most of you know is the co-author of the last 2 volumes of History of Beaufort County. Steve and I have been partners in history since, I think, 1982 or 3, whenever he got here. Steve was born in Toledo, Ohio. He graduated from Wittenberg University, then he got an MA in history from Bowling Green University, and then he got his PhD in history from the University of South Carolina, where he studied under Tom Connolly. He has been since the early 80s the director of the Marine Corps Museum on Parris Island, and during one tour he worked, of course, for General Jack Clement, which is why he's here now. He is a very distinguished historian, in my opinion, the most distinguished Civil War historian who's currently residing in the state of South Carolina. He has written The Lifeline of the Confederacy about Confederate blockade runners during the war. He wrote Gate of Hell about the siege of Charleston, and of course, the assault on Barry Wagner on Morris Island. He is the principal author of Volume 2 of the History of Beaufort County, which is all about the Civil War and Reconstruction, entitled Rebellion, Reconstruction, Redemption. I'm sure I don't have to tell this club the title of that book, because you've all bought it, read it, I know. And he's also the co-author on Volume 3 of the History of Beaufort County, Bridging the Sea Islands Past and Present, which is mostly 20th century history. He will be followed by Bill Davies, an old friend, distinguished Columbia lawyer in his career. He's a Citadel graduate in the class of '64. He is a member of the Board of Managers of the South Carolina Historical Society and is on the ladder to be the president of that organization pretty soon. And he is a member of lots of different historical institutions, and he's going to be, excuse me, Jeff, I lost your, we're all in disorder here because I lost the gavel, you know. He's going to tell you about how we're trying to raise money for the actual battlefield, the story that Steve Wise is going to tell you. So this is a two-part program, and I'm proud to introduce, and Bill wanted me to point out that though he had his career at Columbia, was raised in Greenwood, South Carolina, he has been for most of his life and almost permanently now a proud resident of Edisto Island, so a low country boy. At any rate, they will present to you the story of the Battle of Honey Hill. Thanks very much.
Okay, I'm trying to work this out here. We're here to talk about the Battle of Honey Hill, which is a very beautiful site in the original in South Carolina. And Bill and I, and Larry, Claude Jenkins, who's not here tonight or this afternoon, we're all part of the Friends of Honey Hill, trying to preserve and interpret this battlefield for prosperity. And I guess my first question is, how many of you have heard about the Battle of Honey Hill? Ooh, all right. How many of you have heard about the Battle of Tulifinny? Okay. And how many of you are Citadel cadets? Ah, okay. All right. So I'll bring a little bit of that in as we go forward. All right. Well, Honey Hill and Tulifinny were part of a much larger campaign that we usually refer to as the March to the Sea, Sherman's movement from Atlanta to Savannah. In early September of 1864, before Sherman leaves Atlanta for Savannah, he sends a message to the War Department requesting that the federal troops in and around the Port Royal Sound, Hilton Head area make a demonstration against the Charleston and Savannah Railroad around the end of November. That was about the time that Sherman thought he'd be reaching the coast, coming up on the city of Savannah. He was hoping that this movement would threaten the Confederate line of communications, Savannah, slow and maybe stop reinforcements from coming into Savannah. And if everything went well, just possibly could trap the Southerners in Savannah. If nothing else, it's going to put pressure on the Confederates along the coast, put pressure on the lines of communication coming into Savannah, put the Southerners in a pretty difficult predicament. Word will be passed on to the Union commanders at Hilton Head, both the Navy and the Army commander, and soon a joint Army-Navy expedition is going to be put together under the command of John P. Hatch. Hatch was a Medal of Honor recipient. Of the regiments of the expedition's 11 regiments, 6 were made up of black soldiers hailing from South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Pennsylvania, New York, Michigan, and Massachusetts. And among these, of course, is the very famous 54th Massachusetts of glory fame. Of the white regiments, there's going to be 4 from the state of New York, 1 from the state of Ohio. Also accompanying the expedition, and I worked with these gentlemen, was a battalion of sailors and Marines that will take part in the expedition as well. Now the force is going to leave Hilton Head, they go off the dock at Hilton Head in Port Royal Sound on the night of November 28th. with the intention of disembarking at Boyd's Landing and marching inland to break the railroad at a place then called Beaufort Hill, which today we refer to as Ridgeland, South Carolina. They hoped this would be a quick movement. It was actually sometimes referred to as a raid, get to the railroad before the Confederates even knew what was happening. But bad weather, bad maps, a bad guide delayed their march, allowing the Southerners to prepare a defensive position atop a rise known as Honey Hill. And if you go out there, yes indeed, there is a hill along that road. The Confederates were led by Colonel Charles Colcock, a local businessman and plantation owner. If you're familiar with Colleton Plantation, that was Foot Point, that was his plantation there over near Hilton Head, what is today Bluffton. He also had property around Gillisonville as well. He was the commander of the 3rd South Carolina Cavalry. This was a locally raised regiment that contained numerous men from the mainland area of the Beaufort District, today Beaufort, Jasper, and Hampton counties. Had such family members from the Clelands, the Sauls, the Teutons, the Smarts, the Bostics, the Causeys, the Malthruses, the Yeomans, the Fripps, the Brunsons. They were all part of this regiment, as well as a company from Edisville, Iowa. Also present were portions of the Beaufort Volunteer Artillery. These were men from Beaufort and the neighboring Sea Islands. And these names are all probably quite familiar to you. The Barnwells, the Elliots, the Sams, the Fripps, the Chaplains, and the Fullers. Also, there were detachments from the Furman and Lafayette Artillery, as well as a large contingent of Georgia troops, both Georgia militia and state line and regular regiments, and all about 2,500 men that will be drawn up along this ridge that's referred to as Honey Hill. The Federals, when they do on November 30th reach the Confederate lines, they will 3 times try to force their way through the Confederate position. They will lose nearly 800 casualties. The Southerners lost about 150. From the battle, there will be 4 Medal of Honor awards given to Union soldiers, including Andrew Smith up on the upper right-hand side, a black soldier who saved the flags of the 55th Massachusetts during the attack. Honey Hill is a great victory for the South. The railroad kept running to and from Savannah, but the Federals didn't go away. A week later, they tried again, this time between the Coosawhatchee and Tulifinny rivers. Again, it's going to be about a 3-day fight. The Southerners will stop the Federals from reaching the railroad. Among those fighting at Tulifinny were the state cadets, possibly engaging at a distance the Marines, they're both in the same area of the battlefield. This mural, which is at the Citadel, shows the cadets driving the Marines back through the swamp. I can't prove this ever happened or not, but it is at the Citadel today. They were in the same area of the battlefield, probably exchanged some shots, but that may be about all. It was, however, the cadets' first battle, during which they suffered their first casualties. 1 cadet was killed, 1 was mortally wounded. Though stopped, the Federals will maintain their position, pressuring the Confederates, while Sherman was finally reaching Savannah. And on mid-December, because of this pressure being put upon the railroad, the Confederates are going to evacuate Savannah, retreat across the Beaufort District, across the Company River to take up positions to defend Charleston. Now, these are important battles, especially remembered in this area. It's one of the last Confederate victories of the war. They were fights where black regiments were prominent. Locals, both black and white, served in these actions. And both fights are remembered locally by South Carolinians, by some of the descendants of the regiments that fought here, and of course the Citadel cadets. Large portions